So yes, this is Cenk Uygur versus Cenk Uygur, wrestling not with his conscience but with himself, over RFK's statement that Biden might be more dangerous than Donald Trump. So let's see.
Listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent. I can say that because I just won a case in the Federal Court of Appeals and now before the Supreme Court. It shows that he started censoring not just me. 37 hours after he took the oath of office, he was censoring me. No president in the country has ever done that. The greatest threat to democracy is not somebody who questions election returns, but a president of the United States who used the power of his office to force the social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, to open a portal and give access to that portal to the FBI, to the CIA, to the IRS, to CISA, to NIH, to censor his political critics. President Biden, for the first president in history, to use his power over the Secret Service to deny Secret Service protection to one of his political opponents for political reasons. He's weaponizing the federal agencies. Those are really critical threats to democracy.
Donald Trump, of course, tried to overturn a free and fair election. He tried to overturn one, right? He's still fighting in court.
Yes.
How is that not a threat to democracy?
Well, I think that is a threat to democracy. If him trying to overthrow the election clearly is a threat to democracy. But the question was, who is a worse threat to democracy? And what I would say is, I'm not going to answer that question, but I can argue that President Biden is, because the First Amendment, Aaron, is the most important. Adams and Hamilton and Madison said, we put the guarantee of freedom of expression in the First Amendment because all of our other constitutional rights depend on it. If you have a government that can silence its opponents, it has license for any atrocity.
So just to be clear, you're saying you could make an argument that President Biden is a worse threat to democracy than Donald Trump. That's what you just said.
But who else is?
Okay. Those are all fair points. In my
but just
opinion.
a note on that, it is funny. He got in trouble for this, or not got in trouble. He got some pushback.
Yeah, the usual.
And he tried to walk it back. He tried to say, because Aaron Burnett says, you're saying you could make an argument that Biden is a bigger threat. And he said, absolutely. So then when he got called out by some liberals for saying, you said Biden's a bigger threat, he said, no, I didn't say that. I said the argument could be made he's a bigger threat. So he tried to waffle it a little bit there, which is interesting, because I think the point as itself, as its own point, I think it is valid. He probably just should have stuck to that.
Yeah, well, Cenk actually backed him up on that, on having been misinterpreted. But we know, I mean, this is what we called out with RFK very early on. He's another one. He's a lawyer. Well,
he's that's a lawyer
very
thing.
Slippery.
Oh, I didn't say that. I said you could make the argument.
Right.
I said you could say that. I didn't say it. I said one could say it. Right.
He always leaves himself wiggle room. He always leaves himself some kind of plausible deniability, which is one of the reasons from very early on, and we caught a lot of shit for it, we were not RFK stands. Okay, so Cenk decided to weigh in on this, and it goes in some surprising directions, particularly in relation to an interview he gave to Brianna and Robbie on the Hill, which seems to contradict a lot of what he says here. So let's see what he had to say.
I'm going to say a couple of surprising things here. First, I'm going to agree with Kennedy on 4 things. Then I'm going to tell you why what he's saying is partly a trick. And so, be careful, about his tactic here. But then I have something even more surprising to say. All right, so first, let me tell you the things I agree with. The headlines are wrong. He didn't say that Biden is definitely a bigger threat. He said he could make an argument for that. And you've got to be careful with that. And you know what the mainstream media loves to do. They love to smear anyone who's an outsider. So boom, they took that as an opportunity to do that. So he's right about that. Number 2, he's right to be concerned about Biden being a threat to democracy himself. Maybe not for the reasons that he's stating, but Biden did support anti-democratic movements within the primary. the Democratic Party canceled the election in Florida. They try to keep out every candidate in North Carolina, Tennessee, etc. So they love to rig elections. Yes, I use the word rigged, okay? So you can go cry about it if you're mainstream media. How about you do your job and talk about how they canceled the election in Florida in the primary and just declared Biden the winner? So if you're gonna make the argument that you're a champion of democracy, you should probably try it in your own primaries.
Okay, all right, very strong words from Cenk. According to Cenk Uygur, the Democratic primaries are rigged. Let's go back in time.
Back in time, I would assume before he tried to run in the Democratic primary.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, this was before he announced. This is when he thought he could sell his book without a half-assed presidential campaign.
Right. Yeah. He was going to see how the book sales.
He was just doing the rounds on the book, and then all of a sudden he got the bright idea when he saw his book ranked 87,000 on the Amazon list for political books, as we covered on our own show. He decided to run for president. That's my theory.
In the primaries, Marianne is at this point clearly the best candidate. It's not even close, okay? But as you see there's one thing I wanted to quickly correct, because in my opinion, I don't think the Democratic Party has much power at all. So they set the debates, they set this, they set that. I understand that, but they don't rig votes.
Oh, so it's not rigged then. It's not rigged, or it is rigged. Which is it, Cenk?
You just set all the context. And I hate the rules that they set, and I think they're deeply corrupt. But that's not the number one problem. The number one problem is media. If Marianne Williamson got the same amount of respect and coverage in the media as Joe Biden did, Donald Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy gets, then Marianne would be in a real contest with Joe Biden. But the media freezes her out, shames anyone who supports. Oh, she's not serious. Like, you morons are serious. You've ruined this country.
Okay.
All right, if I could just interject one thing.
Yes,
this
please,
is the delusion, and this is slightly off topic, so I won't spend too much time on this. This is the delusion of these progressives, is they believe that the people are really on their side, and they're just being screwed by the media, or they're being screwed by the DNC, and that if Marianne Williamson were given a fair shot, she'd be in a neck-and-neck race. No, she would not. No, she would not. The voters are not on her side. For better or worse, obviously, there are a lot issue by issue. Sure, I prefer Marianne to Joe Biden issue by issue. She's not a serious candidate. I still wouldn't support her based on her Ukraine stance alone. This was pre-October 7th. Mm-hmm. But this obsession with the fact that, oh, no, actually, the people are on our side. It's just the media. It's just the DNC. It's just these sort of institutional hurdles that we have to overcome. That has not borne out. The numbers just do not back that up.
Okay, and aside from that, I don't think we've really gotten into this too much on this show. Okay, you have an entire PMC class of commentators, and I call them the first and second wave of commentators. The first and second wave of people in this space doing independent media tended to be from pretty privileged backgrounds, and that's why they established themselves. They had the capital, they had the means to establish a channel. And also, frankly, I've talked a lot about how working people, they have a peasant mentality very often. And part of that is not thinking that anyone's going to want to listen to you, because who are you, right? When you're raised in more privilege, it's the opposite. You think you have the God-given right to tell everyone what you think and to represent your historical moment. Now, not coincidentally, all of what I would define as this first and second wave of PMC professional managerial class commentators, that's what that means, all jumped on board with Marianne. All jumped on board with Marianne, who, you know, is almost the living definition of a deeply unserious candidate. I think, this is my personal opinion, anyone who told you that Marianne Williamson was a political project worth investing in is someone you should never take seriously on any political subject again, because it shows at best, a complete lack of political depth. At worst, it represents a grift. At worst, it represents some kind of self-interest. Hey, if I can get on board with this nonsense campaign, maybe it'll gin up my subscriber count because I can hitch myself to that, as I think was the case certainly with Kyle Kulinski and his dominatrix there, Crystal Ball. Now, if you go on to some of the labor issues that Marianne has had, this also tells you something about the people who are continuing, even now, to sing her praises. It tells you how much they actually give a shit about workers. This is from Jen Dye's there, a headline. 7 ex-Marianne Williamson staffers say stop supporting her. You can look that article up. Their full letter is printed there. From Politico, Marianne Williamson's abusive treatment of 2020 campaign staff revealed. Now, I know what some people might say. Oh, but can you trust Politico? This history goes back 30 years. You can find articles in the Los Angeles Times from 1992 describing people who worked for Marianne making uncannily similar claims of incompetence, mismanagement, abuse, narcissism, and frankly, unstable behavior. And none of these people, not only have they not been curious about it, not only have they not done any segments about it, even as one campaign manager after another is resigned from Marianne Williamson's campaign, even as one staffer after another, because she makes them sign draconian NDAs, allegedly, have anonymously leaked what's going on inside that campaign, they are still telling you that Marianne Williamson was a serious candidate you should have invested your time in. That tells you something about these people right there. And in fact, just to drive it home, this was very early in her campaign. She had an interview with our friends at RBN. Let's see how that went. Keaton, do you have anything before I play this?
No, go ahead.
My support for Israel should not be at the expense of my Jewish values. And as an American, my support for Israel should not be at the expense of my democratic values. Right now, it's becoming that way, and that's a problem.
Marianne, I appreciate the answer, but I talked to the Palestinian Community Network, got a lot of Palestinian allies. They will not find that to be an acceptable answer. It's one
well, I know.
I don't know. Have one state where everyone have equal rights under the law. The Israel Zionists are not to be trusted to implement a two-state solution, as that's been shown many and many times. So I hope you have conversations with some of the Palestinians. That's a hard one.
Well, wait a minute. Wait. No. Let me speak.
I just want you can respond to that as well, but because I know you have limited time, because also
okay, I would like a chance to respond.
Yeah, go ahead, and I want to ask you about Ukraine. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, what I would say to you is when you say you have a lot of Palestinian friends, how many Palestinian friends you have? I have a lot of Palestinian friends. You say you've talked to Palestinians. I have talked to Palestinians. So I don't think we have a contest here if you're telling me you know Palestinians and I don't. So that doesn't work for me.
That's a fair point, but I'm telling you.
So the point is, right now, Palestine. See, if you're not going to let me talk, honey, there's no point in this if you're not going to let me talk. If you're not going to let me talk the things you say, then there really is no point.
We are having the conversation.
No, we're not. No, we're not. You're doing a lot of mansplaining here, and you're telling me what is. You're not. You're asking me and then not giving me a chance to respond. So
he's mansplaining to her. That's the person that Cenk claims is the very serious candidate that the media did not give enough of a chance. It's not that the media doesn't have these biases, but certainly Marianne Williamson is not the person to make that argument for. Anything, Keaton?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, the idea that were she given a fair shot, or were any of these candidates given a fair shot, they'd run neck and neck with an incumbent Democratic president is just absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Now, this formulation that he's making now in the context of what RFK said, is Biden the bigger threat to democracy than Trump? Yeah, I mean, I think there is a strong case to be made for that. But it's interesting that he started making that case after he tried to run himself. I mean, he didn't really try to run, but he threw his hat in the ring and saw how impossible it was.
Tried to sell some books and he still couldn't move them. All right, so let's see what he has to say, because he continues on rising. What he has to say about getting involved in third-party candidacies.
But yes, when you get to a general election and somebody's sitting at 3% and the other two guys are sitting at 40%, well, brothers and sisters, I love you, but there is a reality that you are, in fact, taking a vote that would be against Donald Trump, and you're putting it in a category that is not going to win, and you all know that. I'm not saying today. I'm saying if you get to election day, and the polling still shows that, and don't give me this crap about, I don't believe in polling, I think 3% could magically turn into 51%. But if on that day, your candidate's definitely not going to win, why would you help Trump? Why? Why would you help him?
Well,
it just makes no rational sense to me.
Let me ask you this.
All right, so so he makes a vote blue no matter who argument there. And if you're familiar with Brianna's position, she's kind of over that in this election cycle, at least thus far. She's been making a strong post-duopoly argument. So let's see what he has to say about RFK here.
But the most surprising thing is, for the first time today, I'm now considering RFK Jr. Now, what? I know, shocking, right? And no, hold on. Let me tell you why.
All right, listen, man. I know people have a lot of feelings about Anna, but this is becoming like spousal abuse, honestly. Like, you could just see every time he comes out with another one of these harebrained schemes to try to get back the viewership that he lost with Russiagate on down. You could just see her like, what kind of shit am I going to have to eat now to keep this gig? You can just see her die. Look at her face. She's dying inside.
This is like if Kramer and Jerry were married, and every crazy idea that Kramer had, Jerry had to kind of support in some way because he's tied to him. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like if Jerry had no agency. He just had to go along with whatever.
Right.
Whatever
We're going to drop a giant ball of oil out a window.
Yeah.
Rather than Jerry being able to just like roll his eyes. Yeah, good luck with that. You know, he would have to be like, seriously, we're going to drop a giant ball of oil out a window? You know, like that's what this is.
Well,
like she can't just dismiss out of hand his crazy ideas, whether it's like running for president or now doing this complete 180. She's like, wait a minute, what?
Right.
What? You're going to completely reverse everything you've been saying for the past 8 months? Yeah.
Well, you could see he didn't prepare her for this. And look, my read is a lot of these cultural positions Anna's been taking on the air. I could be wrong. This is my theory. She's trying to build her own brand so that she could get away from this maniac. And when he makes her have to go along with this, it doesn't help her build the credibility she might need to do such a thing. So to continue.
So is it because I think, maybe he's right about vaccines? No, he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs on vaccines. And on several other things where he believes in conspiratorial theories that I don't believe in at all. So why on God's green earth would I consider RFK Jr.? Well, until now I hadn't, because of those crazy things that I don't come anywhere near believing. But I thought about it, Anna, and Trump I would never support in a million years. Biden is now funding a genocide.
Oh, you don't say. You don't say. Well, I mean, I could see why that would bring you to RFK. RFK is much better on this, right? Speaking of Kyle Sugar Mama, this was on Breaking Points here.
The Palestinian people are arguably the most pampered people by international aid organizations in the history of the world.
Are you kidding me?
No,
even before this war, 78% of people in Gaza said they had, not enough food to eat.
Right. And why is that? Why are you blaming Israel?
In part, it's Hamas, and in part, it's the fact that Israel imposed a blockade and talked about putting them on a diet.
If your neighbor, first of all, Israel has no obligation. It's not Israel's fault. Gaza is poverty-stricken. Gaza should be one of the wealthiest states on the Mediterranean.
They have no control over their own territory.
Of course,
Israel
if you go to war,
everything that comes in and goes out.
If you go to war, no, Crystal, why are you blaming? Why do you insist on blaming Israel?
That is maybe the most remarkable part of this entire thing to me. He says nothing about RFK's position on Israel. And he actually brings up the subject by saying Biden is committing a genocide, and then he keeps going. I watched the whole segment to make sure I wasn't taking it out of context. No, never brings it up. Keith?
I forgot about that part of the interview, actually. Gaza should be the richest country in the area. And wow, that is something else. But yeah, no mention of that. That is a remarkable pivot for sure. And I still don't really understand the rationale behind his formulation there. Like,
I mean, I'm starting to suspect the rationale.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I think on a serious note, I think, stations like TYT are very invested in making the most out of an election cycle. Like it's not lucrative, or it's not nearly as lucrative to go into an election cycle with no candidate as it is to go in an election cycle with a horse to back, because you can generate a lot of content and a lot of momentum and a lot of loyalty, frankly, if you back a certain horse. And, shows like our shows like this one, who are more comfortable just, I don't know, telling the truth as we see it. If there's no candidate worth backing, so be it. We won't back anybody. These other channels, I don't think are as comfortable with that, because they see this as this is like the World Cup. It comes around once every 4 years. You got to be in it to win it. You got to back somebody in order to get all of that sort of momentum that comes with it. So maybe that's what it is.
Well, that was part of our take on Marianne, when all of those
they needed
that
somebody.
Class of commentators coalesced around her very early. Yeah, I think that was definitely part of it. And yes, in seriousness, I do think that's part of it. Like, they just can't imagine not backing a horse, like doing a whole election cycle.
What are we going to go? An election cycle without rooting for anybody? Without generating outrage? Oh, could you look how the media smeared our candidate in this interview? Isn't that horrible? You can do a million videos about that. They'll all do very, very well. So it definitely helps a channel to have a horse to back. But I think if you look at the field and you see no one worth backing, as I see no one worth backing in this cycle, even the candidates I am more aligned with on the issues have just proven to be a complete mess when it comes to organization, to the point where I could not in good conscience tell people to support them, to invest in them. Then you have to just sit it out from, and that's, if that's the truth as you see it, you just have to tell the truth as you see it, period.
Well, that is really why I'm so offended by the way they tried to prop up Marianne. That's why I bring that up, because being in this space, I remember when we first started bringing this up, we didn't have a lot of reach. I mean, we definitely, when that first came up, we had maybe 5,000 subscribers, right? And the first video I did on it, which was the Kyle, lying about what the Politico piece said about her staff defections. I said, look, you got a platform and people listen to you. You have a responsibility. And now that we have a little more reach, I feel that even more acutely. Like, when we go and endorse something in a political project, we feel a responsibility, like, because, people trust you. That's an enormous responsibility, man. You can't just talk shit like that. And I find it offensive that you've got people who have such visibility, who care so little about the people who watch and listen to them, that they would just try to get them involved in things that I just can't imagine they don't know are just absolutely nonsense. Why are you doing that to people?
Yeah, no, it's I think you're right about that.
All right, so Cenk was not done.
So am I positive RFK Jr. would be worse? He would probably, on health and science, definitely he would be worse. But on everything else, like anti-establishment, money out of politics, I'm not positive RFK Jr. would be worse than Biden.
Oh, okay. I mean,
and it just doesn't even know what to do at that point. So okay, but listen, to be fair, they didn't end the conversation there. And at the end, they made a bid to show their viewers their remaining viewers, all 6 of them, that they are serious political thinkers and they do have serious proposals beyond RFK to offer to their remaining viewership. All right, so let's see what they came up with.
I know they don't believe it. I know I can't get it through his thick head that this is true. But if Jon Stewart ran right now as a third-party candidate, he would win. He would flat out win. Because that's a guy who's honest. His positions are almost identical to the American people's positions. He's against corruption. He's a decent human being and he's smart. Oh my God. And he's funny. He's entertaining. People love people that are entertaining. Jon Stewart would win as a third-party candidate. For God's sake, John, God damn it, do something. Don't leave us with these horrible options.
Oh God.
You know what? I saw Shecky Green the other night down at the Copacabana. He'd be great.
He'd be terrific. Yeah, no, like I said, they want a candidate. Please, somebody run who we can support. Somebody, preferably someone who was born here.
How do you see that and then take these people seriously? Take them seriously as somebody that has an opinion that has anything other than comedic value. Really, Jon Stewart. Aren't you the same people who ran around talking about Trump's total lack of political experience and qualifications? Now you want Jon Stewart? What do you even talk? Jon Stewart, who very quickly got bullied from taking a very mild position on Biden maybe not being the best person to face off against Trump. Now it's all GOP Trump derangement syndrome 24 hours on his show. That's the one who's going to bring together the country and win in a landslide. Like what the fuck are you even talking about? What are you even talking about? Like, it drives me crazy. You get paid to talk about politics? This is what you're proposing. Endorsing RFK after claiming that, vote blue no matter who, because there's no point to third-party candidates. And now it's draft Jon Stewart? What are you doing? What are you doing? Go open a pizzeria. Hire some of these delivery drivers. They're out of work.
Well, when your channel revolves around electoral politics and election season is prime time, this is the kind of shit you have to cover. You have to gin up excitement and ratings around this kind of nonsense when you really can't do much of anything else.
But we don't. See, this is what I don't understand. The world's on fire. The world's on fire. There's more to cover than we are able to cover with 2 shows. We're doing 2 shows right now. We're doing Jimmy's and ours, and there's still
that's
stories
why we're in
we
a different
can't
sphere.
cover.
Well, this is a different section. This crop of channels over here is sort of a different section of the online left, I guess. That TYT world revolves around this kind of very blue pill electoral politics stuff. And that is what constitutes a political channel in that space. And so that's the only explanation I have. I mean, what? So he was entertaining RFK for what? 90 seconds? Yeah. And then he pivoted. No, never mind. Jon Stewart. We need you, Jon Stewart. We need you. Dude, for God's sakes, do something.
I hear Carrot Top is available.
Yeah.
Hey, there's still tickets available in Stockholm, Oslo, Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, Cortland, New York, Oakmont, Pennsylvania, El Paso, Texas, San Antonio, Texas, Edmonton, Alberta, Vancouver, British Columbia, Denver, Ashland, Virginia, and Athens, Georgia. See you there.